But it's bigger than that when I say the table is the stage of life. We use restaurants to celebrate the biggest moments of our life, to propose, to break up, to tell someone I'm sick, to introduce a new baby to the grandparents. Mm-hmm. We focus a lot on the food. Instagram and the world of food journalism is often about what's on the plate, the work of the chef, the technique. Actually, that's not what gets me excited about dining. It's a part of it, and it helps set the stage. But actually, it's not the food that brings us together around the table. And that's what I mean by the table being the stage of life.
Have you decided what you're going to get?
Oh, yeah, definitely we're going to get one of each.
One of each. Got it.
Hello, Ryan. Happy to be here with you today. This is actually, I'm quite excited. I've been thinking about doing a podcast for so many years, not so many years, but some years, I would say. A lot of friends have told me, hey, why don't you do a podcast? I always say I don't have the time or I'm too busy. But finally, through some friends and maybe I don't know what's the trigger that said, okay, this is the right time. But we're finally here and I'm super happy having you as the first official guest on this podcast called One of Each. And the story of One of Each, and you being a witness of that, is sometimes I love that feeling when you go to a restaurant and it's the perfect combination of the number of diners, the size of the menu, where you basically say, I'll have the whole menu, just bring one of each. No?
Which is your favorite trick.
Which is our favorite trick. And so yeah, I'm super happy to be here. And I have to say something. This is our first episode. So if you are looking at watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, it means that some crazy people out there, and by some crazy people, I mean like basically two guys, thought that this conversation that we're going to have now is interesting enough for some other people to watch it and hear it. So if you're listening to this, means we're not the only two crazy guys, but there are some other crazy guys out there. So I hope you're actually watching this now. So just to introduce Ryan, it's easy and hard to introduce somebody like Ryan because, I mean, we're very close friends. We've met each other. We've known each other for over maybe 12 years.
Yeah,
no?
about 12 years.
12 years. We not only know each other well, but we've known each other and met in a very particular circumstances, which is around great food. Whether it's food events, food tours, basically visiting each other or planning a trip somewhere. And always food is like the main purpose of what we're doing. And then everything else revolves around it, no?
And do we have permission to speak about how we actually met?
I think we do. I think that's a good start to set the note.
Is the statute of limitation passed is my question.
I think it will set the tone for what this podcast will be about. So I would say yes.
Okay, so Enrique Olvera is not going to sue us if we speak about how we met.
I hope not. Can we block this podcast to be like streamed in Mexico?
I'm just checking that your legal department is ready for what might come from this story.
We will.
Okay, so we met 10, 12 years ago?
I would say 12 years ago, yeah.
Off the back of a big festival in Mexico called Mesamerica.
Mesamerica that Enrique used to do, and it's one of the inspirations actually for Lengua, which is one of the conferences that we do these days in Glutonomy.
So I'll tell it from my side, and then maybe you tell it from your side. It was my first trip to Mexico. I've never been to Mexico before. I got what is nicely referred to by the locals as Montezuma's Revenge, which I didn't know anything about at the time. Now, having been through it, I know exactly what that is, and that is that the gringos that visit Mexico, the outsiders, get sick. You're not used to it. It's the water, the ice, the spice, all of this food that you eat. So I'd got quite sick on this trip. I was there to cover the event as a journalist. I work as a food journalist. I've worked as a food journalist for 15 years.
And Sasha is the one who invited you to to cover the conference, no?
Yeah, so our mutual friend Sasha Correa
Yes.
had organized this festival alongside Enrique Olvera. It was the first really big food festival in Mexico. It really set the tone for what future food festivals have looked like, because
Absolutely.
in the past everyone would get up on stage and spend 45 minutes cooking a dish, and food festivals at that time were chefs speaking to other chefs.
Yeah.
And what they did very, very smartly, I think, is add the cultural context of what
Yeah, I
food is
remember
about.
one of the closing participations was like an unplugged show of Café Tacuba,
Yep.
while Enrique was cooking and Café Tacuba was playing. That was something.
So, take you back to my situation. I'm sick and I'm not feeling good. I'm nursing Gatorade. I'm chomping down on Pepto-Bismol. And I phoned my editor back in Italy at the time and said, look, I'm too sick to do this festival. Like, I am not in a good place. And then she said, look, I didn't send you to Mexico to come back without content.
Exactly.
Go to the festival. And if you remember, at the side of the festival, there was all these street food vendors
Absolutely,
that they'd brought
yeah.
in. So every time I had to interview a chef, I had to walk past like Taco al Pastor and all this food that like I was scared of at the time because I was feeling so sick. But I had to push myself through these days to be able to get enough coverage to write an article. And I was just recovering. I think there was like 1-2 days left of the trip, and I was just starting to feel good about myself again, like feel like a human being. And I got a message, and it said, we'd like you to join us tonight at Pujol. If people don't know what Pujol is, this is one of the most famous restaurants in Mexico City.
I actually met my wife there in Pujol.
Of course.
Yeah, but to put people in context, this festival, and sorry for the
Please.
parenthesis, these festivals usually, I mean, nowadays there's many festivals around the world. Mesoamerica was a great one. I think went for over like 5 years. But in these festivals, there's not only content during the day at an amphitheater or a venue where you have talks and everything, but usually there's a parallel agenda of dinners, tastings, and those dinners end up in after parties and everything. So it's a very intense couple of days or 3 days, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but you end up really like exhausted, hangover, tired. So, and I can relate to how you were feeling those days.
So yeah, and no one wants to turn down an invite to Pujol. I mean, that would be stupid. That's one of the best invites you can get in Mexico City. And,
In the world.
And I wrote back and said, look, I don't think I can handle more spice. I'm just starting to recover. She said, actually, tonight we're doing Italian food. We have the two Frankies.
The Frankies from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn, and they're doing a sort of restaurant takeover. And at the time, I was actually living in Italy. That's why I'd phoned my editor back in Italy. So the idea of Parmigiano and eggplant Parmigiano tomato sauce was very comforting to me. Like that's probably my perfect meal back. But this text message, this invite had a parenthesis. It said, brackets, but don't come as a journalist. Strange, because everyone wants me to come as a journalist.
Yeah.
They want me to post.
That's what they are flying to.
Usually why I've been invited.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just because of my nice personality that they invite me.
Definitely not the looks.
So I'm like, oh, what an odd request. We want you to come down to Pujol tonight, but not as a journalist. The intrigue is too high. Okay, I'm in. And I get there, and that's when I met you, Carlos Garcia.
We were sitting next to each other.
We're on a table together. I'm like, who are these two crazy guys? Like, I evidently you're really into food, and I'm looking forward to this Italian food. And I get there, and we sit down, and there was just this weird moment where I see people coming out of the kitchen with apples on silver platters. The first course at this Italian dinner at this Mexican restaurant is an apple. I'll never understand what's happening. And this apple got put in front of us, and it turned out that the apple was actually a pipe, like a cannabis pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah? That's
Absolutely.
the best way of putting it.
And that was the first course.
That was the first course, and the whole restaurant, some of which had no idea what to expect, me included, were presented a smoke to begin our restaurant. Now, knowing a bit more about the two Frankies, that shouldn't be surprising.
Absolutely.
That's kind of how they roll. So we sit down. I watch a young daughter teach her dad
That was beautiful.
how to because it's not easy to smoke from an apple, but the entire restaurant start to smoke. The thing I remember about you and Carlos is that the eggplant parmigiano came out. It was amazing. I didn't know Enrique so well at this time, but you guys felt comfortable enough to do what you call a rewind.
The rewind. Yeah, so in this tasting menu, basically, those tasting menus, you have, 6, 8, 10 courses. I don't know if we'll have time to talk, but we've done some crazy tasting menus, like 40 courses or something. So usually when there's like a amazing dish, you just want to like pause and say, you know what, I'm going to have this one
instead
again.
of one of each,
exactly,
2 of these.
Exactly, exactly. So we did a rewind on the eggplant parmigiano,
Yeah, and then I was getting into it. I was obviously a little bit high as well at this point because we'd all smoked an apple together. And I remember going into the kitchen and chatting to the guys. And through my misspent youth, I learned how to do the perfect smoke ring, like the cartoon smoke ring. And I was in the kitchen doing these smoke rings across the pass, essentially.
Are we going to be allowed to do one here?
You tell me.
Yeah.
And
no, you tell us.
And one of the chefs was stabbing this smoke ring with a knife, and it was fun. And the more I got into it, the more smoke rings I sent, the more he stabbed them. And at the same time, I look in the corner and I see a guy with not a basic camera, but a big professional camera. As you know, I worked in news television.
Yeah.
I can spot a reporter from a mile away, and this guy's pointing right at me at the time. So I quickly rush back to the table. I sit next to Sasha and I say, Sasha, you told me not to come as a journalist tonight. Yeah, no journalist tonight. So who's the guy in the kitchen that's just filmed me?
Definitely is not with an iPhone. Yeah.
Who's just filmed me blowing smoke rings. She quickly stands up, runs away and disappears for like 30 minutes. Comes back a little bit flustered, a little bit angry, I must say, and said, that's Vice News. They're here to film the Munchies show for the 2 Frankies. And my mind starts to panic a little bit here. Like, I'm here representing my organization. I've just been filmed smoking an apple in the back kitchen of Pujol, blowing smoke rings across the pass.
Being stabbed.
Yeah. I also know that that's a good clip. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm already in the edit room. That clip's being used probably at the very start of this documentary. Like, that's a solid. That's
the intro. That's the trailer.
A solid clip. That's my job on the line in that clip. So, Sasha, what are you going to do about this? There's nothing I can do. Enrique has said it's fine. That's going to go out on Munchies. And I spent the next few weeks panicking. I mean, the dinner was amazing, no? Because if you get a whole restaurant high, it has a certain effect.
And then Enrique, after the dinner was over, we had the party, and Enrique, who loves music, he was like DJing.
And that's all he really cared about that night was his playlist. And I remember that at one point we took all the tables, we put them in a circle, and it was like a real kumbaya moment, no? All of these famous chefs.
I'm thinking of all the faces. I'm not going to name them so we don't get more people in trouble, but you and I and Enrique. But yeah, everybody was in that dinner.
But then I spend the next 2 weeks in a bit of a panic. Like, shit, this is going to come out on Munchies, and this is not going to look good for Mr. Serious British journalist just starting to work in the world of gastronomy. And weirdly, a couple of weeks later, I was invited to a dinner in Italy. And I sit down in Italy, and I do that classic thing when you first sit down at the table, and I introduce myself to the 4 people around me, and I say to the guy to my right, what do you do? He said, I'm the chief video editor for Vice. I said,
oh, I need to talk to you.
Yeah. I believe you're working on a video right now about something that went on at Pujol, and I'm letting you know, I do not want to be in this video, and if I am in this video, I certainly don't want this clip.
Yeah, because at that point we didn't sign anything.
No.
Yeah.
This is a proper gotcha journalism is happening in right now. And so I said, I'm letting you know categorically, please don't publish this clip. And then it must have been 5 weeks later, this video came out. And we couldn't do it now. Now it would be impossible. But that video came out. Enrique's lawyers went into overdrive and explained to him, hey, this is illegal. At the time, the rules around cannabis were not as loose as they are now. This is not going to look good for you. This needs to be taken down.
And it was.
And it was.
Yeah,
It was
I remember.
removed. It was online for 1 hour, 2 hour. It's probably in some dusty vault somewhere in the archives of Munchie's Vice.
Yeah.
And now it would be impossible because it would be copied, clipped. It would be on Instagram. It would be on TikTok, on Twitter. Someone would have done a mirror and put it on YouTube. It would be everywhere. And actually, it's a sign of the times because it came up, it went offline.
And unnoticed.
And it's become this legendary dinner of, did this happen?
I think it didn't happen. I think you're making up just to be... clear. I think you just made up that story to look good.
Dude, I was shitting myself. I thought it was going to cost me my job. I was, especially because I phoned my editor and been like, oh, I'm sick, I can't write. Yeah. And then suddenly,
you're
here he is dancing around. Smoking apples. And I must admit, every restaurant should start with an apple course because, of course, you get the munchies and this is the Frankie's whole MO. That was their whole vibe.
Yeah. And who knows, now with edibles and so many versions of edibles or ways that you can incorporate cannabis into food, I don't see why not, like a first course could be, part of the amuse-bouche is a bite that has some milligrams of cannabis. Totally.
So
totally
that's
valid.
it. That's kind of my memory of meeting you and Carlos Garcia, who's obviously a great chef here in Miami. And I knew pretty much immediately that we would remain friends.
Absolutely.
It was just an obvious connection, and that's the great thing about dining. No, you have this moment where there's a space to exchange. You have this moment where I could meet you in 100 other scenarios and not make the connection we can make over food.
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of a round table and sharing those stories. And yeah, I'm super, thankful of many of the relationships that we have built throughout these years in the food community are based on the beauty of sharing a table among friends. I think, and in my case, it comes from, my parents are Lebanese, and for my father was super important. No matter what you're doing, you better be here at 12:30. We're going to have lunch together. Then you can go whatever you want, but lunchtime is sacred.
I have one line in my Instagram. That's it. It's been like that for years. It says the table is the stage of life.
There you go. Is that you made this or you stole it from someone?
It was actually some copy I tried to sell for an advert that didn't get bought when I was working in an ad agency.
But
and
you're using
they never bought it. So I said, okay, I'll use it myself.
Great. Now it's yours and you can claim you're the author of it.
And I genuinely believe that. There's a deeper thing. It's not just a statement. I truly believe that we use restaurants as a sacred space. The table... There's something that naturally happens. We could be walking down the street in New York, in Miami, and we could both be reading our phones and we could bump into each other and we wouldn't even look up. We'd step to the side and carry on walking. And we don't even think that's wrong. But when you get to the table, what often happens is people will naturally turn their phone around. If I don't know you very well and we're at a table and you're looking at it and I say to you, hey, we're at the table, you understand immediately, and it's rude to do that because this is where we exchange.
Absolutely.
But it's bigger than that. When I say the table is the stage of life, we use restaurants to celebrate the biggest moments of our life.
Yeah.
To propose. To tell someone we would like
to break up too.
To break up. And that's what I'm getting to propose, to break up, to tell someone I'm sick, to
close a deal, a big business deal.
To introduce a new baby to the grandparents. Literally. This is the first time maybe you meet the child.
Yeah.
It's for Valentine's. For
meet the parents, like the in-laws.
And good restaurants are there for that. And great maitre d's, great hospitality are the people that understand that's a table that's breaking up. Let's not interrupt them much.
Yeah.
That's a table that wants to have a lot of fun. Or that's a table that wants to have a lot of information. And we focus a lot on the food. Instagram and the world of food journalism is often about what's on the plate.
Yeah.
The work of the chef, the technique. Actually, that's not what gets me excited about dining. It's a part of it, and it helps set the stage. Good food sets the stage.
Absolutely.
But actually, the there's a moment about 10 minutes into a meal where I get this energy, I get this and I feel it coming. It's like a bit like when you get adrenaline. It comes to me and I'm like, I'm consciously aware of this feeling when it hits me at the table, and I ride that wave. And I think I saw in you, this is someone else that gets that same excitement. Also from the food, yeah, because if the food's bad, we're not going to be there. But it's not the food that brings us together around the table. And that's what I mean by the table being the stage of life. And Will Gadara, who I think is one of the best speakers in the world of food.
Authors now.
Author, he wrote the book Unreasonable Hospitality that almost anyone in any profession should read. He says a line that really resonated with me. He said, working in hospitality, feeding people, it's the most noble profession in the world. And when you truly, really buy into that what I'm doing is I'm giving myself to create a space for you to live your life out in this space that I've created, it truly is the most noble profession in the world.
Yes and no. I don't know. I know we both are part of the food industry, and I applaud the work that chefs and restaurant owners do to emphasize the importance of their role in society. And I always think, why don't like builders do the same, because they build our homes, or carpenters say we build the doors to your house and we provide protection.
That's why you're in branding and marketing.
So I think the restaurant industry and the chefs have done an amazing job in emphasizing their importance in society, which I totally think it's right. And then I say, why don't other industries do the same? No, the cars, like we
connect. Yeah, we allow you to get from this point to this. We drive you to your loved ones.
Yeah, if it wasn't because of us, you wouldn't be able to introduce your son to your grandparents, no, things like that.
And yeah, maybe that's the spin on it. But being part of restaurants the way we are, and the way I have been for the last 15 years as a food journalist, there's something special that happens in those spaces.
No, those connections are definitely
And the table
strong.
doesn't have to be in a restaurant. It can be a rug in a park.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't need to be around.
You speak about those builders, but, the good crew at lunchtime, even if they're all just sitting on upturned pallets, often sit in a circle and dine together. It's something, it goes back to fire. It goes back to sitting around the fire, sharing stories and cooking meat on the bone directly across an open flame. It's something innate in humans.
Yeah.
And I often like to say this because I think food can seem a little bit superficial. It can seem a little bit lighter than it is.
Depends how you look at it. Yeah.
It's important. And the cultural exchanges that happen in this space, in the stage of life, that's important.
You made me think, I know you don't love Seinfeld. I love Seinfeld.
I struggle with Seinfeld.
Yeah, I like it a lot. And we were talking about there's a restaurant for proposing, which I remember when I lived in Caracas, there was a restaurant called Mezzanotte in a hill, like the ceiling open and you could see the stars, and everybody would book a table there to propose or anything. And there's an episode in Seinfeld where I think George gets George gets invited to have dinner at Pomodoro. And Kramer and Jerry are like, don't go to Pomodoro. That's where people go to break up. And the next thing is like the restaurant, every single table is like two couples, like one couple in each table, like all crying. It's brilliant.
It's funny because there's a restaurant in Italy called Lido 84.
Yeah.
It's on Lake Garda.
We tried to go and it got cancelled because of a COVID case, remember?
Yeah, I remember, yeah. But that's the same. It's right on this lake. They have this special room that if you want, they can fill with rose petals. And I often say that to people. How long have you been with your partner? Oh, it's the 6th day. Okay, you're good.
Yeah.
It's the 20th day. Hey, dude, if you're not ready to have a ring in your pocket, be careful because she's going to expect that or he's going to expect that as soon as you get in the restaurant. And it's funny because I love to read reviews. I never critique a restaurant when I've been. I'll speak to the chef. I'd rather tell him if I had a bad. I don't go on TripAdvisor. But we all like to read them, no? And one of the ongoing themes, if you read the reviews of this restaurant, is like, everything was perfect. The food came out, the pasta was perfectly al dente, the wine pairing was amazing. But throughout the night, I was eating the dessert slowly because I expected I was going to bite down on a diamond, because it really sets that tone that people expect there to be a proposal.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we love what we do, and one of my favorite things to do is to travel to eat, and many of those dinners are like very special places, not necessarily fine dining, but special places, destination restaurants. And my wife Paola, she's a chef, so she also enjoys food a lot.
And you met at a table.
And when we met her,
did you propose at a table?
No, that's where I'm going. We met at this fantastic restaurant, Pujol. We were not sitting in the same table. We were each one dining solo, and then we met in a table outside by pure coincidence. But we travel a lot. We have amazing dinners, like you name, like great restaurants all over the world, romantic setups, private setups, fantastic meals, and I would used to joke before I proposed, like, oh, here goes another opportunity where I could have proposed, no? Like,
I'm sure she loved that.
Yeah, exactly. And I kept like burning those tickets. And one day she says, no worries, you'll propose one day at home, like while we're watching Netflix. And that's what I did eventually, no?
And I'm guessing you were probably watching Chef's Table.
No, we were. I think we were watching, and if that's not the movie, I'm gonna get
this right. Yeah, get this right.
I think we were watching Love Actually, and we were in where she lived at the time in London. And yeah, I proposed. We were at home. We had a home cooked meal, watching a movie, and that's where I proposed, because you want, like, what's special, no? And I don't want to sound here like arrogant or anything, and this is part of our job. So we have had amazing dinners everywhere, and at some point, it's great, it's amazing experience, but it stops being special. I'm not trying to minimize it, but when you do those type of meals many times, you appreciate the food, you appreciate the hospitality, but it's not like once in a life. I mean, we're very fortunate to have many meals that are considered like, oh, once in a lifetime meal. And again, I don't want to, maybe we are, but I don't want to sound arrogant. So what becomes special for us? Special is home cooked meal, stay at home, like enjoy that moment. And Paola always jokes have no joke, like she books the nights that we are, hey, next Thursday we're staying at home, we're cooking, we're watching a movie, no restaurant reservations, no events. And
because if you get your way, there's two dinners, which you like to call bang bang.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think it's beautiful. Like going back to what you were saying, what happens at the table. It could be a blanket in the park. It could be a table at a nice restaurant, a table at home, at a burger joint. It's really special, that connection.
And also every culture's got these little things that they do at the table. No, recently I dined at Seoul Salon in New York,
I love it.
And they were passing out soju, and every time he passed out soju, the guy, he held his hand like this, and it was obvious. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "That's a sign of respect." And in Korea, we serve our elders. The youngest serves the elder, and that happens in lots of cultures.
Yeah.
But another way of marking that respect we have is that we hold our hand like this when we serve.
Wow.
And I found that really beautiful, this small little thing that happens at the table. And going back to what you say about, yes, we are exceptionally lucky. I have written about food for 15 years, and not just food. I've written about fine dining, Michelin restaurants, the top restaurants in the world. So I have probably accumulated quite a few of those once-in-a-lifetime moments. What I'm proud of, or something that consciously I decided, I saw very early on when I entered the restaurant space, a lot of people that took that for granted.
Absolutely.
A lot of people who would be invited on a free trip, flown business class, looked after with an itinerary designed just for them.
Chauffeur waiting downstairs
Chauffeur
at the
waiting
hotel.
for them, all the best restaurants in the city, a local guide that helped them translate if required. And the first thing they would say to you is, oh, the champagne's a little bit warm.
Yeah.
And I started to despise that a little bit. I really, really didn't like that. I'm from a humble background. I'm from the north of England, a place called Bradford. I'd never, until I got into this world, I'd never seen foie gras. I knew what it was. I'd never seen it, let alone the idea of caviar. I'd never tasted it. I didn't know what it was. These things that now truffles tossed on top of a risotto.
Yeah, Ignacio Medina, I'm sure you know him, Spanish journalist who lives, I think he moved back to Spain, but he lived in Peru for a long time. He used to say, I need to go out, eat some lobster so I can bring bread home. So it's
really important to me that I've always tried to really appreciate those moments. There's another thing where I always stop and I remind myself in my mind, you're lucky.
Yeah.
This is lucky. Remember this moment. Enjoy it. Really take it in. And don't take it for granted. I mean, my first Michelin meal is a funny one because I was working in news journalism. So I was working in a radio newsroom in the north of England, BBC Manchester. That's my background, news journalism. And I'd met an Italian girl. And met her in reception. She'd come for work experience. We'd started this relationship. I imposed myself and said, would you like me to be your guide around I'll show you the best food in the canteen here. And we'd started this relationship and she'd gone back to Milan. And she kept finding, the relationship was strong and we wanted to be together. And she kept finding jobs for me. And I was going to Milan and doing interviews, and a bit like Spud in Trainspotting. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah,
but they tried to get Spud a job, and he doesn't want a job. So he goes in and he speaks really fast like this. And he purposely doesn't get the job so that they won't take away his social payment. I was kind of doing that in interviews. I was doing these interviews, and I was at the BBC. That's a dream career for a young journalist. I'd been a graduate trainee for them. I'd progressed through the newsroom. I was getting all this amazing training. I was surrounded by all these really established journalists. Why would I leave this scenario? Yeah. And the same thing happened. She said, there's this agency, they're starting a website. It's all going to be about food, actually really high-end food. I'd done the interview and it had gone really well.
It's about people who love fine dining.
Yes, basically.
Hence, fine dining lovers.
And I'd done this interview. It had gone really well. And even then, I'd come back. I remember I'd flown back early on the Monday and I was working the afternoon shift. So I was going straight into work. And they'd left me a voice message just as I was getting on the plane. And it was like, hey, Ryan, we just wanted to call. It's really good news. Call us back. So I kind of knew I was going to be offered this job. I called them up on landing. We would like to offer you the job. Okay, I need a couple of days to think about it. And I'd gone into the office and I'm doing my shift. And I had an editor at the time who was like one of these people that he was either looking at his screen or he was reading a newspaper. He very rarely looked up. But he'd speak to you, but he was doing so much stuff. He was like a news machine.
All you needed is like a shitty afternoon to take the offer.
Well, it was funny because he said, what did you do on the weekend? I said, I was in Italy again. Oh, you're still dating the girl in Italy? I was like, actually, I also did a job interview on the Friday and they've just offered me the job. And still, he's reading the newspaper. And we're having this, I'm across the room, he's here. He said, what's the job? And I said, they want me to go and write about restaurants, but like really high-end restaurants. There's a lot of money behind the project, so I feel like it's quite a stable project. And for the first time, he put his paper down and he looked across the room and he said, what are you doing here? Nice. Okay, this is great, but you're at the lowest point on the ladder. If I need tea right now, you make my tea. The best stories you're going to do are potholes in the road for the next year. You're building yourself up. And I still remember this guy called Mark Elliott. And he said, every now and again in life, you'll come at crossroads and you'll be offered opportunities. And if you're lucky, it'll happen twice in your life. These big crossroad opportunities. You have one of those opportunities right now. The door is always open. And I think that's what I needed to hear. It's such a risk stepping away from this big organization to do an independent website. But the door is always open. And that I owe him a lot. In fact, by that Friday, I was on a plane to Italy.
Wow. With your luggage.
Pre-Brexit, I managed to I had a really good landlord. I just moved
You're
house.
not that young. It was like decades pre-Brexit.
Yeah.
Come on.
I'd just taken a house and I had this landlord that was really cool. And when I explained to him, he's like, don't worry, we'll break the contract. We'll let you out.
Oh, nice.
So by that Friday, I'd gone. And I think about 2 years later, I ended up writing. I was coming back from a trip. I'd had this amazing trip. I was having another one of those, shit, you're lucky. Don't forget you're lucky. And then I'm lucky because that guy pushed me. And I just took my phone out and I sent him an email and said, you know, right now I'm coming back from Mexico. Tomorrow I'm going to New York. Everything's going well.
I made this great guy.
Yeah, I met this great guy called Nidal. But I just said thanks to him. You know, thanks for pushing me out.
And going back to your point of taking those meals for granted, when after you do many ones the right way, it's not about the food anymore. The service is about like the people behind it, the stories behind it. So you start looking at those meals with different eyes.
You start to intellectualize food a bit.
Exactly.
A bit like art, a little bit like you would go into a museum, no? Someone who truly appreciates art is looking at it, looking for different layers behind that food, yeah.
Absolutely. And as I look back now, we've had some amazing meals. I mean, maybe too many to put together in whatever time we have here in a podcast. But I remember one, it wasn't a particular meal, but a trip. I was relatively new to Miami. I was in my third year in Miami. Miami was, and we talked a lot about in the conference, how Miami has been growing as a culinary city. And you came to Miami, I think you spent 3-4 days here, and you were writing an article about how Miami was growing as a culinary city. And I remember you called me or messaged me like 2 weeks ago, like, hey, these are my dates. Show me what's going on. Let's meet the new, like the up-and-coming chefs. What's interesting? I'm like, how am I going to fill up a full 3-4 days of food in Miami? Knowing what can I show Ryan in Miami that can impress him, that can show him how Miami has grown, having the standard that we have for all the meals that we've had. So I was very not pessimistic, but I was like, okay, let me see
you
what
felt the pressure.
Yeah. So as I started putting together the list, I found out like, dude, I mean, this is a great lineup. These are amazing people that Ryan should meet and interview. These are like fantastic meals. Like I'll show him this dish from this restaurant, this dish from this restaurant. We'll try and have.
I still remember we had to get up really early and go put our name down on a list to eat sushi in like a Japanese supermarket.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's they move and now it's Sushi Erika, and the old guy, unfortunately he passed away some years ago. It was the guy, his daughter, and the mother was in the front of the house, and they were running this fantastic, I think it was called Sushi Market, and they were running this fantastic place. It was like a Japanese supermarket with a counter.
Amazing.
I remember that. So what I was going is, as I was putting together that list, I said, that's the first time I realized that Miami was changing and there was like a path and we were becoming this culinary hub that we wanted to be. I remember a fantastic meal at La Mar with Diego Oca, where Diego always, he's great.
And that's the one restaurant I go to every time I'm in Miami.
And that was many years ago, and I still remember we ate tasting menu, like off-menu items, and I still remember some of the dishes we had that meal. My point is, thanks to you writing that article, that was for me a tipping point on understanding where Miami was going as a culinary city. And now, 5 years later, 6 years later, it's obvious like we are in a much better place than we were at the time.
And the funny thing is that pitch didn't come from, oh yeah, I want to write about food in Miami. It came from, I was reading something and it said that Miami had the highest internal immigration within the US.
Wow.
That's interesting.
And that was even pre-COVID, because with COVID,
it boomed more.
It boomed even more, yeah.
Also, there's been tax cuts as well, I think, which increased
Yeah,
even more.
a lot of people from New York
immigration.
are moving here because of state tax. Of course, the weather's friendlier all year around. And with COVID, where they were pushing, like people were looking to have more like outdoor time. Miami was a better place for that. So many factors influenced on that influx of people.
I think the thing for me was that, like, traditionally, you, as an outsider, even I think within the US, you see Miami as this tourist destination, this place you go for a couple of weeks, and the food at the time, when it is tourist, it starts to reflect that. It becomes seasonal. The workers become seasonal. The food becomes seasonal. Restaurants have these like spikes.
Absolutely.
So what really caught my eye was, okay, you have this huge internal immigration within the US, lots of young people. That was the other thing. It was young immigration, young people moving to Miami. What is that going to do for the food scene? And then I know a young person,
Thanks.
I'm getting you back for the Brexit comment. I know a young person who's moved to Miami and is obviously going to be the greatest guide. And yeah, we did this piece, Miami is maturing.
I remember. Speaking of you getting to know places in Miami, and I'm proud as a Venezuelan and as a now Miamian, I'm proud to have introduced you to the world of cachitos, which I'm just a little intro. Bakeries in Venezuela, especially in Caracas, they are mostly owned and operated by Portuguese immigration, and they have different like pastries and breads and everything. And one of them, probably the most popular, is the cachito, which is like a moist bun, usually made or stuffed with ham.
Very sweet.
Very sweet. Yeah, the dough is very sweet. So we were in this place that we love called Caracas Bakery, very close. I mean, they opened a while ago in Doral, and then they opened like over a year ago in Biscayne. And we went there for breakfast. It's very close from home. And you tried the cachito de jamón for the first time. And I'm going to do a pause, fast forward 8 months. I was visiting you in your home in Paris, and you were about to receive a steam oven because you were actually doing cachitos at home, and you needed that specific oven to get the level of moist that you needed. So what happened in between?
A lot of fights with my wife because we already had an oven and we don't have that much space. And the biggest problem was that I bought that oven from a US company. My wife's an architect, so like things fitting, things being straight, things being neat is very important to her. And I'd measured this oven and sent her a message like, I'm about to buy a $600 oven, steam oven.
Because
which
they need
is
to make
not
cachitos?
what upsets her. Where's it going to go? I've measured it, it fits on the shelf. It's the size of a little bit bigger than a microwave, I told her. But
I've seen that oven.
what I'd done wrong was that it was in inches.
Oh boy.
And I'd read centimeters and not realized I was reading inches. So it was much bigger than expected. It's still a bit of a bone of contention, this oven, because we still don't really know where to put it. It's just like sitting on a table in the kitchen. But yeah, I got back to Paris. I love the cachito. There's something about it. It's soft. It's warm. They steam it, which gives it this like almost moistness. It's already a very moist dough. It's got butter. It's got milk in. It's very enriched, the dough. Mm-hmm. This contrast between the salty ham and this sweet dough. For me, that's the perfect treat for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Like it's the height.
Yeah,
I don't need to tell you. Yeah. You've grown up on cachito, but for me, it was completely new. And I get back to Paris, which is, of course, full of bakeries, full of pastry shops. It has this tradition of baking. But I can not for the life of me find a Venezuelan baker anywhere in Paris. And people tell me, yeah, I get them, but it's actually through someone's home and I can't access this network to find cachitos. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to learn how to make it. And the problem with my job, maybe it's actually a benefit, is often I have the reference point for how good something can be. Yeah. Because we work with great chefs, great artisans, great people that are really passionate. I've eaten the best cachito here in Miami and maybe one of the best cachitos in the world.
Absolutely. Even though because of I mean, Venezuela has gone through some like political, economical problems. I wouldn't be surprised if. I mean, this can be taken the wrong way, but I wouldn't be surprised that there's better cachitos or tequeños or arepas or cachapas, you name it, outside of Venezuela than in Venezuela because of the access of quality ingredients or labor. So I'm not surprised if Caracas Bakery's cachitos in Miami is one of the best cachitos in the world now.
And so that's my reference point. Yeah. That's what I'm desperately seeking. That's what I want to give myself again. And I know where I've got to get to. And it was a long process because as well, every recipe is in Spanish. Every video I found was in Spanish. Eventually I found one that I was like, okay, I think I can. The video was done so clearly that I could read all of the weights on the scale that they were using. And so I started to play around with it. And actually the dough is not the hardest thing for the cachito. That's actually, once you've got that down, it's fairly simple. What's hard is they're rolled and wrapped in quite a unique way. You pinch here, you wrap it around
because
the hand.
they're very tight.
Yeah, and you have to roll to the right and then roll to the left. And when you see a cachito, you see that pattern on it.
Yeah.
And then I was cooking them, and I've got this reference of Caracas Bakery here in Miami, and mine are coming out too crispy.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be crispy. It's got to be pillowy soft. It's got to be... And that's what led me to then buy this steam oven, which I do use for other things, mainly because if I don't use it for other things, my wife's going to throw it away. Okay. But it was all for cachito. So the best cachito in Paris right now is coming from
your
my house.
Place. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm proud of that.
Perfect.
But it really put a strain on my relationship with my wife.
That was a very nice trip. I want to go back to that trip. That was last summer of last year, no?
Yeah, you got me back. Like, I'm coming to Paris and I want you to show me around. And
yeah.
It's funny because that happens to me all the time in Paris. It's a good thing about living in Paris. People come and visit, but when you say that, I'm like, oh God, I really feel the pressure because you've done it for me in so many places. Yeah. I know the level of dining you expect. It took me like 3 weeks to put that itinerary together.
But you did something very smart, which I wouldn't have done without you, which that weekend we hit the classics like Lyonnaise, Paul Bert, lovely, because I wouldn't have done it by myself because you always want to try what's like new and hip and everything.
And that's actually a problem, I think, in our world. We get in a little echo chamber. And sometimes we've got to force ourselves to get out of that echo chamber because every journalist is pointing towards certain things. Yeah. There's the new hip restaurant of the time. And I did throw a few of them in.
It was great.
But I wanted us to step out and say, look, Paris is an institution and we should go to some of the institutional restaurants.
And I love Rue de Nil is the... Rue de Nil, I don't know.
Rue de Nil.
Rue de Nil. It's little street, like pedestrian block.
My favorite street in Paris.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Rue de Nil is it's essentially like a cooperative street. So the guys all come together and from an outside perspective, it's a street of lots of different shops. You've got a cheese shop, you've got a coffee place.
Frenchie's is there.
Frenchie's is there, Frenchie wine bar. You've got this bakery, you've got this chocolate shop. But actually, they're working together to create this street where you could, I mean, if you're rich enough, because I once tried to do my whole shopping there and I was told we're not shopping like that again. Yeah. But there's a fish shop and it's just this amazing street of really passionate producers, great restaurants. The chocolate shop there is amazing. And when they're cooking the cacao, you can really smell it in the air. And that's the great thing about Paris as well. They still respect those traditional artisanal trades.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, because you've been in the food industry now for some years. We won't say how many. And how is it for somebody who lives, enjoys food, and works on food to live in Paris? I don't know. It's like for a Barcelona fan to live in front of the Camp Nou or something. How is it in terms of what you enjoy and you discover, and also like when people visit Paris and you have the opportunity to show them what's going on, like how's that life now?
As with my story about Italy, I follow my heart like a compass, yeah. For an English guy, I'm a bit of a romantic, probably why I gravitate towards people with Latino blood as well. So my wife is French. We met in New York when I was living in New York. And that was kind of the driving force to me moving to Paris. But I also knew that I was going to have this education in the true history of gastronomy. The great thing about Paris is there's someone visiting every week. Chefs, journalists, friends. And it's such a diverse scene as well. Like there's so many restaurants, from those classics to those new, more modern bistronomy type of restaurants. There's a great international dining scene there as well. I feel exceptionally lucky living in a place that respects food as much as the Parisians do. Another thing I love about the Parisians, they always order dessert. Always. Yeah. Even for lunch. You go out for lunch and they do these 3-course set menus, which is pretty standard for lunch there. And everyone orders dessert. And I love dessert. So I was like, this is a culture I can get behind. And having that foray into the classic French sauces. I mean, there's one dish that I obsess about. It's le vrai à la royale. And anyone listening who is French is going to hate the way I pronounce that. I apologise, but it's the royal hare, essentially. Yeah. And there's a myth to this dish. There's a legend to this dish. I love that shit, when there's like a backstory to something. And the legend is that this dish was created for Louis XIV because he had bad teeth. Like, Louis had terrible teeth. Okay. And he loved to eat meat, but he couldn't chew meat. So he said to the royal chefs, I want you to create a dish that's very, very meaty that I can still eat. And the royal version of this dish should be very soft to bite. And it only comes around in sort of October, November. It's a very seasonal dish because you're using wild hare. Back in the day, they used to hang the hare for a long time. I once interviewed Jacques Papin, the famous French chef, who cooked for a lot of the prime ministers, the presidents of France. He cooked for 3 presidents in France. And he said, when I used to do that dish, we would leave the hare hanging so long that you would actually see maggots in the hare. And of course, that's not the case anymore. Yeah. But you leave this hare, you sort of cut it and you collect the blood, because the blood of the hare also becomes part of the sauce. And it's mixed, and your foie, some people just to make it even more rich, they add truffle on top. And it's one of these dishes that as soon as it hits the table, it doesn't matter what wine you're drinking, it's not big enough. It's not big enough. Give me a glass of the biggest red wine I can afford. It's usually what I say. And every chef of a certain caliber in Paris starts to do this dish around October, November, and they've all got their own take on it. Some do it in sort of a terrine version, and some do it in this ultra soft version. My personal favourite is Bruno Verjus. We visited Bruno Verjus together.
The Pétivier...
No, Bruno Verjus does a version of this dish, and it just melts away in your mouth, and he does this little puree underneath, and that adds a little bit of sweetness to this very rich, really rich sauce, because, you know, you've got the hare, which is already rich, you got the foie, you got the blood. It's opulence of the highest order. Yeah. And when I started to obsess about that dish is when I really fell in love with French gastronomy.
I think my version of your dish is the Pétivier and all the like pâté en croûte. I mean, the Pétivier is probably the most refined version of a Wellington or pâté en croûte. They're all families. And I remember we had an amazing one at Bruno Verjus. And I've been trying to replicate or to do pâté en croûtes at home. I'm still on stage 1, like going, if 1 is it's basic difficult. And 10 is the perfect one, I'm still probably in 0.8 or 1. But I love the process of sourcing the meats, coming up with the combinations of what, like pork or duck or other meats and spices, and then working on the different doughs. I have like 4 or 5 different books now about it. And remember in that Paris
Sans
tour,
Apostrophe,
Sans Apostrophe, and we were lucky that he was there. What's his name?
I can't remember.
I remember. I'll find out. We'll put it in the link below. We were lucky he was there. He signed our books. He showed us around the kitchen. And I still remember we had this amazing pâté en croûte of chorizo and...
Chicken and chorizo.
No, it was chorizo with red peppers, with piquillo peppers. I said that was over a year ago, probably no less than a year ago. But I said I'm gonna replicate that at home, and I haven't tried yet. Afraid that it's gonna like.
It's the same. Once you've got that that's the best reference
exactly.
for pâté en croûte, and
exactly.
And then it becomes much harder to make it acceptable because you know what the best is.
Exactly.
And weirdly, and now I'm realizing I have an issue with sizing. We both left with the book, and I said, okay,
Yes.
Nidal's trying this. I'm going to try make these at home as well. And I went online to order because you have these like metal cases.
Yeah, the
that you do it in.
rectangulars.
Yeah. And it came and it was tiny.
Yeah.
I think I sent you a picture of it. It was like the smallest pâté en croûte in the world. So my oven's too big, my pâté en croûte tin's too small. There's obviously a theme.
Yeah, you better like check the measures and the conversion on
and
your
I'm
shopping.
married to an architect, so you can imagine how much it upsets her when it comes. She's like, what is this? It's like,
I'm going to like open the oven and put this little thing inside.
And you would spend like 2 days getting it ready and doing it all, and you probably eat it in 2 minutes because it's so small. So I've never even used it.
And one of the things, and I love these recipes, like Venezuelan hallacas are like this. Pâté en croûte is one of those recipes that you have to plan in advance because you can actually eat it the day before because you put it like regardless of all the process of the meat and the dough and everything, when you bake it, you take it out of the oven, you have to let it cool down, and then the meat shrinks. So you have to fill the gaps with gelatin. So you do the holes on the dough, you pour the gelatin, and then you put it back in the fridge, and you have to wait 1 day to eat it. So it's one of those dishes that you have like really planned in advance, and the expectation comes, and then you have no idea how it's gonna look on the inside until you cut it and open it. So I love the whole, more than loving the actual flavor of a good pâté en croûte is the process, no?
And time is often the ingredient that makes food the best.
Absolutely.
And people who are not obsessed with food don't get it. Like I can put beef cheek in. My wife will say, what time is that ready? I'll say tomorrow.
Exactly.
What we having for dinner? I don't know. I'm planning tomorrow.
Exactly. Order a pizza.
Yeah. And I've really had to get her into that because she was into like cooking meals quite quickly and eating efficiently, eating for nutrition. No.
This is
we eat for pleasure. We seek.
Which is I'm a very, and I understand I'm like the exception to the rule. I'm very anti food apps, like food delivery apps, because two of the things that I love to do most when talking about food is cooking or eating out. And ordering food in is like the opposite against both things. So I'm like the worst. I don't have any of those apps on my phone. Proudly, I say that all the time. But even like having food, like why do I want food delivered home? Like how, if I'm too busy, I just think what I can do really fast. So I'd rather do like a very quick noodle or a sandwich at home than waiting the same 45 minutes for food to arrive.
Pizza deliveries always upset me because pizza is one of those things that you should eat it a la menu.
Yeah, especially if it's like Napolitan pizza.
Immediately.
Yeah,
it comes out of the oven, it hits the plate, and I'm eating it seconds later.
If I really need to have food delivered because, I don't know, we're super busy at the office and we need to have something delivered and eat it in 10 minutes or something, I would go for sushi. That's like, I mean, I like it. It's light. It travels well.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
that's my, like, if I have to order food for delivery, it would be sushi, my choice.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm fully into that.
I don't know if there's time restriction. I think we can talk for days.
I think it's your podcast. We can speak for as long as you want.
Exactly. Oh, really? We don't have to pay by the minute?
No.
Oh, my God. No, I wanted to ask you or to share, because we've talked about this before. There's a story that I love about you and Massimo that involves a Maserati and speed. And I wanted you to recreate that story because I've heard pieces and parts here and there, but I think we've never properly sat to listen to the whole story. And I think this is the great space to do it. We even have like microphones and everything.
Okay, so Massimo in this story is of course Massimo Bottura in Italy. That's a little bit of context. One of the best chefs in the world.
From Osteria Francescana in Modena.
One of the best chefs in the world. Certainly the best chef in Italy.
Yeah.
And certainly someone who took Italian food to another level.
Yeah.
If you know Massimo, there's a thing about him. He's very passionate about other disciplines.
Yes.
He loves art. He's a crazy music obsessive. He collects lots of music, and he likes fast cars. And his latest book is actually called Slow Food, Fast Cars.
Yeah.
And that makes sense when you start to think of geographical context, because he's in Modena, which is the home of Ferrari, the home of Maserati.
Ducati is there too.
Yeah, the home of all of these beautifully engineered, crafted Italian supercars.
Yes, and the Italian F1 race is run in Monza, which is half an hour.
Very close.
Yeah.
And it probably takes Massimo 5 minutes to get there in one of his fast cars.
Yeah.
Like he likes speed and the artistic value of these beautifully crafted cars. And his collection of cars is amazing.
Yeah. By the way, if I have Sasha sometime in the show, she has a similar story. Even
I've heard this story.
Involving a Ducati and Italy playing in the World Cup match. So I hope we go there at some point.
Okay, so I don't think Massimo will be upset. In fact, he's quite proud of what he did to me that day because he always mentions it. I got a call. I was working at the website that I mentioned. I was running this website. I got a call from a friend in a different advertising agency who said, "Are you busy tomorrow?" Yeah, I'm working.
Yeah.
She said, "Look, if you cannot be busy tomorrow, I suggest you're not busy tomorrow. What's up?" We have a shoot planned with Maserati. It's to launch this new limited edition Maserati. There's like 8 of them in the world. And the idea is that we were to have Massimo with a journalist driving around in this Maserati, and the journalist has just pulled out.
So basically, that's one of the things that you have to do for work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just I wanted to have some context there.
Do you think you could step in? You know, first of all, do you know Massimo? Actually, yeah, we've done quite a lot of projects together. Like, I think we'd bounce quite well together on this. And let me see if I can get the time off. No, I suggest you do.
Okay.
It's going to be a
calling sick or whatever. But
yeah. So I managed to get the day off. I go up to Modena. I meet with the Maserati. We stayed overnight. That was it. We stayed in a hotel overnight so we could start really early in the morning. I meet the Maserati team around the table the next morning at breakfast, and they've brought 2 of these cars. They've brought 2 engineers to make sure these cars are looked after, because, as I say, there's like 8 of them in the world. Wow. There's a camera crew. There's a van that's to follow us. There's mics.
If they can.
It's a full production. And I said to the guy, I'm not the best passenger. Like, you know, I'm a bit of a nervous passenger. Like, I had a crash when I was a bit younger with some friends, and it's always put like a bit of nerve. And they're all sort of like looking around like, what do you mean? Like, who the fuck sent you? Yeah, like, exactly. Like, Mr. I'm a bit nervous in fast cars. Like, who decided you were the right person for this job? So this engineer says, look, get up, I'll teach you a few tricks. So he takes me out. And of course, the engineer knows how to drive this Maserati. I'm going to teach you a few tricks. And like, we get in the car.
If you want to vomit, put your head out.
It was more about like having a focal point on the window to look at, because that stops any type of motion sickness. And I felt pretty good.
That's interesting. So
you stare at like one point.
Not in the road, but in the
at
actual
one point
window.
in the car.
Okay.
Yeah, like it was like a little divot in the dashboard of the car. If you keep your focus on that, you'll be fine. But what he's not also imagining is actually what I'm supposed to focus on is a list of questions that are strapped in front of me. I'm trying to read them, and it's not going to be the engineer driving. It's going to be
Massimo.
Mr. Bottura driving the car. So then we head to Massimo's house. It's the first time I saw his house, and then they opened his door. Then he's, the fuck are you doing here? He literally said that. What are you doing here? I'm the journalist for the day. I'm the stand-in. And I remember he said to me, are you more pussy than Alan Jenkins? I say, why? Alan Jenkins is a very famous journalist from The Guardian. He said, because the last time I took him out in a car, he didn't like it. And I was like, he's already taken up the challenge of freaking me out here a little bit. So we get in this Maserati. It's a monster car, yeah? Monster car. The first thing they tell Massimo is don't press that button. And the button's like right on the gear stick, it says turbo. What do you
Knowing
think?
Massimo, yeah, of course.
The first thing he does
Yeah.
is press this button, which turns the engine up like 10 times, yeah? Like it makes it
Wow.
supercar. And then we just start driving. And the point is I'm supposed to ask him these questions as we're essentially spanking.
This is being filmed. No.
Yeah, we've got GoPros all over
Yeah.
the car. We're mic'd up at certain points. There's a guy who gets in the back with a camera to film as well. But he, even at one point, is like, okay, drop me off. Because Massimo is driving this car. It's almost like one of these Woody Allen films where, like, I remember at one point we're driving down these streets of Modena.
Which are not highways. They are like two-way,
There's this little old lady crossing the street with like a bag of tomatoes, and like I'm thinking like the scenes a few minutes before where she drops the tomato and she's picking it up slowly, and we're coming veering down like very, very close. And as we go past, Massimo waves at her, and I'm like, put both hands on the wheel, Massimo. and he realizes I'm struggling with this, and he's loving it. So he's going a little bit faster, and he can drive. This is the thing. He can drive. He's not a regular driver. He knows how to handle these cars. But then it gets like Massimo, he likes to do his own thing, yeah?
Yeah.
And at one point, I remember he's like, okay, slow food, fast cars. This was a statement he would use a lot. And like I say, it's now the title of one of his books. He's like, okay, let's go visit Parmigiano Reggiano. So we drive to this factory where they make...
The Hombre one.
I can't remember exactly, but it's one that he's very friendly with. It's the one that provides him with all his Parmesan cheese. We go to visit this place, and instead of leaving the car outside this factory, he says, wouldn't it be great? Slow food, fast cars, slow food. You know what he's like. Slow food, fast cars. Wouldn't it be great if we got a shot of the car with the cows in the field? And at that point, he then just drives the Maserati into the field. And I'm looking at these engineers, and they're like, because this car, like the amount of space on the ground.
And at this point, you left the van behind, I guess.
This happens a little bit further, but like you've got this little tiny gap. We're driving into a field, and you've got these big cows, these dairy cows, round the Maserati, and Massimo telling the producer what to do. Like that's the shot. So we do that, and then we get back in the car. At one point, we're driving so fast, we lose the van behind us, and then they're in my ear, like, can you tell him to slow down? I'm like, no, he doesn't. Like, I'm not in control here. I'm asking questions. And the last question was, if this car was a dish, what dish would it be? And he likes this question.
Yeah.
He's like, he gets all Tom Wolfe on me, like spin painting, woo baby, yeah. And he's like, it would be like a cotechino with a red sauce, a green sauce, spinned, contemporary meets tradition. He's such a great communicator. He kills this question. But then he pulls up, quick stop, and he gets on the phone. And he calls back to the restaurant, Osteria Francescana. And by this point, we're miles away from the restaurant. And he phones back and he says, get me a green sauce, a red sauce, a yellow sauce, blue sauce.
Yeah.
And they're, the type of kitchen that immediately start to make the sauces that he's asked for. Yeah, get a cotechino going, And the guy in my ear, because I have the guys in my ear, the producer's like, we don't need him to cook the dish. We just want him to speak about it. The last thing we need to... It's like, you tell him then. I'm not...
Massimo, you're not cooking today.
My life's in his hands right now. Like, I'm not telling him, like... And then I remember him saying to me, how far away from the restaurant are we? I get the map out. It says 40 minutes. And on the phone, he says, we'll be there in 15. Puts the phone down, and we set off again.
Press the turbo.
Turbo's been on since we left, yeah? Like, the turbo's not gone off this car. And we drive so fast. I mean, I'm more nervous because I'm a nervous passenger. I wouldn't say it was dangerous. He's in control.
Yeah. I'm just thinking how the Modena or our Emilia-Romagna little roads
windy
are.
streets.
Yes.
Yeah. But he's done this before. He's a master. We get back. They are miles behind us. We lose them really quickly. Even the other Maseratis not keeping up with us. The van is definitely not keeping up with us. We pull up right outside the restaurant. Everyone can hear us because this car is like the sound of a thunderstorm or something like that. Pulls up, goes in, starts to check the sauces are all right. And I don't know what it is, but at this point, I start to do what Massimo does, which is like, what would be a good shot here?
Yeah.
I say, imagine if the Cotechino got finished on the engine. I don't know why I said this, but I give him the idea. Imagine just last touch of that dish. The Cotechino just touches the engine and then gets put on the plate. Yeah, I love it. So to keep the engine warm, he puts me in the driving seat. He's like, rev the car. So as these engineers and producers finally catch up and pull up, I'm just sat in the car. Yeah. Revving, I don't know, a €300,000 car just to keep the engine warm while he's in the kitchen putting the final touches on the dish. The engineer comes by and I was like, I'm doing what he told me to do. You know, I'm just following orders. And the producer comes by and I'm like, you're going to love it. because I've worked in television, I've worked in production, I know exactly the shot and how amazing this shot will be. And that's what happens. Massimo comes out, touches the Cotechino on this Maserati engine. You get a sizzle. These engineers are pulling their hair out because like their job is purely to protect one of 8 classic Maserati cars.
And now it's got like pork fat.
Yeah. Boom, touches it, puts it on the plate. I mean, the video came out. It's beautiful. It's not what they expected whatsoever. And yeah, that was a day of work for me.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he still brings it up every time I see him. He's like, "Should we go for a ride? You want to go for it?" I'm like, "Never again, man."
And talking about work, and I don't know, I mean, again, I have such a long list. Maybe we can meet again in your next trip to Miami to keep talking about this, and maybe we'll have accumulated more stories then. So maybe we should do like once a year, like the Ryan King episode on one of each, no? But tell me what you're up to now. You just put together Rooted Agency, which is your own thing now after many years of writing and journalism. I know you're putting yourself out podcast. You better invite me. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about it. What you're working on. What are your future projects?
So yeah, I worked for this website for about 12 years. I left a couple of years ago to start my own agency. I'm essentially working on owned media. So I believe in the power of chefs, restaurants, brands in owning their media channels, whether that's a podcast, a magazine, an event, a Netflix series. Content storytelling is what I love to do. So I tap into this idea and I'm trying to work with different brands, different chefs in sort of giving them their own channels that they can own. And they also then own the audience. So one of the projects I'm working on now that I'm most proud about, and really, you know, as an entrepreneur, the good thing about stepping out on your own is you decide what you do.
Yeah.
You choose what is right for you. And one of the first projects I put together is this podcast series called Heard. I'm working with a couple of different brands on this. One is Accor Hotels in Paris because they're very focused on wellness, and also San Pellegrino because they're very focused on helping the culinary community progress. So Heard is something I'm exceptionally passionate about, and that's about kitchen culture, wellness, better balance in restaurants.
Which is a huge topic now. I mean, it's been for some years, but now I think there's consciousness in the industry about the mental wellness of not only chefs but the whole like ecosystem of people who work in the
our
industry.
idea is to focus on mindful mentorship is something we settled on, and then I also like this idea of let's put the rest back in restaurants.
Did you also register that one?
You know it. I collect domains for fun. So I've got, this morning I got an email from GoDaddy like you owe us like $500 for domains you bought 7 years ago that you've never used. So I'm truly passionate about this. I spent a lot of my time as a journalist writing about this. I ran surveys and studies on kitchen culture. I presented a lot on this. I like to be a voice that forces that issue and forces that conversation. I think one of the problems has been that we know there's an issue. We know that we need better balance. Right now, that issue's become even more important because of issues with hiring and making the job attractive to the next generation of young chefs. Millennials, Gen Z, will not put up with bad working conditions. They'll move and go somewhere else. There's an economic driver now as well. It's not just about saying the right things. We really do need to fix kitchen culture. So the idea we've heard is to speak to professions that are not necessarily within the restaurant group. Like we're speaking to a sports psychologist from the NFL.
Nice.
Because there's a lot of crossover between what a sports psychologist does with a high-end sports team and the advice that person could give to a high-end restaurant team. We're speaking to a breathing expert, Wim Hof, who's like this amazing breathing expert from the Nordics. He spends a lot of his time in ice water, but he truly believes by just understanding how to breathe correctly, you can lessen your anxiety, you can help your posture because breathing correctly fixes your posture.
Nice. And I started recently doing cold plunges.
Cold plunges.
I love it.
Really
and
big on this.
Yeah, and I heard that's what they teach me when I do it. Breathing before and after the cold plunge is one of the most important parts of the actual plunge, no?
Yeah, so it's that. We just want to bring in a little bit of advice from outside professions. We've got someone who's written a book on wellness, and it's the idea of, hey, we know there's an issue. When chefs get together, we speak about the issue. We probably don't know how to fix it yet. We just know there's an issue, and there's many ways to fix it. Another person we're speaking to is this great restaurant that has got rid of the hierarchy of kitchens. Because a lot of people don't realize that kitchens are organized on a hierarchy designed by a French chef called Escoffier over 100 years ago. And he based that hierarchy on the military. Even the positions, the names of the positions, how it works, and, even the idea that you kind of, if you're at the bottom of that hierarchy, you get the worst jobs, you get broken until you manage to prove yourself and work your way up the hierarchy. So we're trying to find restaurants that have actually foregone that for a flattened hierarchy. And I'm not saying it's bad, because it's that hierarchy that allows you to have the fish, me to have the meat, and someone else to have the salad, and it hits the table at the same time. Before that hierarchy, restaurants served things as like banquet or feasts. You all ate the same. The idea of choice comes from that hierarchy. But while other professions have developed and changed and come up with different ways of organisation, lots of restaurants have maintained this old school hierarchy and the thinking that comes with it. So one of the guests that we're bringing in for the podcast is a restaurant that's got a flattened hierarchy.
Nice.
So the bad jobs we all do together, and rather than one kid having to chop 25 kilos of onions until his eyes are bloodshot, everyone gets involved and we get that job done in an hour, and then we can move on to the next thing.
Interesting.
We're looking at cooperative kitchen models, so models where everyone in the kitchen has a share in the restaurant, which is another way of retaining staff, making them feel part of the business. They go to the meetings together with the accountant, like the whole team of 15 sit down with the accountant once a month. So we're really trying to show examples and techniques and tools that are going to help restaurants in this ongoing conversation about better balance in the industry.
Interesting. And I want to close this. I mean, first of all, before popping up the last question, I want to thank you for accepting the invitation. As I mentioned before, this is the first episode ever of this podcast called One of Each. And it's not an accident that you're my first guest for many reasons. One, we know each other very well, so I knew it's going to be, I hope, an open conversation. But two, you're such a good communicator that you made my life much easier today. Having said that, I want to, and connected to the name of the podcast, if you could pick a restaurant now with the right amount of people where we could sit and you would order one of each, which restaurant would it be?
You should have told me about that question. So
I got you.
It's such a tough question because the restaurant, they're a bit like, what's your favourite music? It depends what mood I'm in, no? It's very similar. It all depends on the mood. I'm going to pick a restaurant I haven't been to, but one I'm a bit obsessed with, and that would be Josh Nyland's restaurant in Australia. So Josh, they call him the fish butcher. He's developed this technique of catching fish in a beautiful, sustainable way. They use the hikajimi method, which is essentially a way in which fish are killed that stops any rigor mortis, it stops any stress.
Yeah.
And that immediately affects the texture of the fish. But then he also has this belief that we've done fish wrong for hundreds of years, is his argument. Because what we do is we take it off, we scale it, which is really aggressive, it's not good, and then we put loads of water on it. And actually what happens when it's been scaled is you create this honeycomb, and that water just sits, and bacteria grows. And you wouldn't take a piece of beef and suddenly put a load of water on it. And so the reason he calls himself the fish butcher is because he's using a lot of butchery meat techniques and applying it to fish. So actually they use sharp knives and they cut just under the skin.
And many chefs have adopted that technique. I see it every day more and more.
Growing everywhere. They age the fish.
Yes.
They leave it hanging for a long time and they age it, which changes the texture as well. One of his favourite things to do is show videos of him barbecuing fish, and he'll lift the whole fish up and it will stay intact like a piece of steak. Whereas
fresh fish,
you do that with regular fish, it just breaks down.
And you get like flakes like stuck in the grill.
Yeah, and I interviewed him once and he said something really interesting to me. He was like, the only reason that in every recipe book about fish that there's a lemon served with fish is to counteract all the bad things we've done to that fish. And that fishy smell that we're used to, that we associate, that shouldn't exist. And so his fish is much sweeter, it's cared for. He's also got this mad approach to sustainability. I believe right now he's using like 98% of the fish that they catch.
Yeah.
Like he told me the gallbladder is the only part of the fish we have no use for.
He even makes ice cream with the ice.
Yeah, he uses the gelatin from the eyeballs to make an ice cream. And you know, intensive fishing is terrible. It's not good for the world. So supporting someone who's found an approach where there's true respect for that animal from the point at which it's taken from the water to the point at which it hits your plate, I think that's the type of thing I like to support. He's a wonderful chef. I've interviewed him many, many times. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to go to Australia.
So far away.
So right now, evidently you're inviting me for dinner, in which I can order one of each.
That will be...
Let's go to Australia.
Yeah, amazing. Let's do it. I'm announcing now before knowing where this is gonna go. I'm already setting a date for a follow-up interview to this one. And I just, while you were talking, I just made a note that says St. John Whole Pig. So we're gonna talk about it.
Did we do it now?
No. We're gonna do it the next time. I don't know. What do you guys think? We do it. We leave it for the next time, or we do it now?
I think we can do it now.
We can do it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is something I'm still upset about. Yeah?
I'm still upset.
I have nightmares about this. Sometimes I wake up in hot flashes and I'm like, the whole pig, St. John.
Yeah. The only good take I've taken out of this is now they feel embarrassed every time I go
you
to
can get
St.
a
John.
booking anytime you
so
want.
yeah, and I get also like freebies, like this here and that.
And it seems quite apt that you've got a pig.
Actually, yeah, not coincidentally. This is one of my favorite restaurants in the world, St. John in London, which luckily my wife used to live in London before we got married, so we go there quite often, and this is one of my go-to places every time I'm there. But the story goes back. World 50 Best Gala is once a year, and they rotate locations. Last year was in Valencia.
Yes.
The previous year was in London, which I remember was a very warm summer in London. We were there with an amazing group of colleagues, chefs, writers, and you were in charge of the dinners, the meals.
I was asked to put together, and this happens a lot in our job, I was asked to put together an itinerary for a group of visiting journalists / chefs / hospitality people.
Yeah. And I remember you asked me, okay, help me with this lunch.
Yeah,
so,
let's think about it. And I think we went to the pie room, no? We booked the pie room.
Pie room, which was amazing, but we are like super critical. And we, even having that amazing meal, I remember we still criticized the fact that we ordered the beef Wellington, which is their signature dish, and one of the beauties, and I talked about, we said this like half an hour ago, one of the beauties of those dishes is the moment where you actually have
The whole
the
thing
dough,
together,
and
yeah.
then you open it and see the inside. That's one of the beauties of having a beef Wellington, and we didn't get that moment because they brought the slices, the
I remember.
slide beef Wellington. So that was
But the whole point of the pie room was that, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to show British cuisine.
yes.
And British cuisine, let's be honest, gets a bad rap around the world. And, you know, the French, the Italians, lots of other cultures kind of,
Yeah,
roast
Spanish,
beef,
yeah.
British cuisine. And then we knew that there was this chef, Callum Franklin, doing this amazing work with old recipes of like things like you say the beef Wellington, classic suet
The
pies,
pies. Oh, that was
beef and
amazing.
kidney
Yes.
pies, like all of these amazing classical things. So we knew we wanted to do that. They had this also. They have got like the best gin collection in London.
Yeah, they
now.
have
It was
the
like
gin Bible list their menu.
They
Yeah.
have 200 gins there, so you can do this amazing gin tasting session. And then another point, and let's give context, St. John is the restaurant in London.
It
no?
is.
Fergus Henderson.
yeah.
It's
They put British cuisine in the map, and
not
many
only
of
that,
the
developed the idea of nose to tail dining.
which Neelan is doing the
With
same
fish.
for fish, but
Yeah.
inspired by Fergus Henderson. And so going back to that, you asked me, okay, can you help me with the St. John reservation? So it's big table, 12, 14
I tell
people.
you why St. John, because it's interesting because again we're there to celebrate the world's 50 best restaurants
Exactly.
list. And there's always been this legend, this story that in the early days of the world's 50 best restaurants list,
Which was held in London at the beginning, always.
all of these guys, the top chefs like Ferran Adria, Thomas Keller, Heston Blumenthal, at the end of 50 best, and I don't even know if this is true, it's like a rumor, it's a mythical thing.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's true.
They would book St. John and they would book the whole suckling pig,
Yeah.
which is a special dish you've got to order.
You have to order like 4 days in advance,
Yeah.
and of course, it's not like something you and I will go and order the whole pig. Like we need to be at least 8,
Well,
10
that's
people.
the other thing. Yeah, you need to have a table large enough to justify ordering a whole pig.
Large enough and hungry enough.
Yes. So that was kind of the logic behind, not just because St. John is so important and they do, you know, the marrow and the salad
Yeah.
that they do, and there's all these famous dishes. I wanted to play into, hey, you're tasting a bit of 50 best history here because this is what these chefs used to do to celebrate after the awards.
Exactly.
And I think our table was what, 12?
We were
strong?
12 people, so yeah, I go through the whole like email back and forth, ordering the pig, saying like, hey, this is an important table. We are in the middle of 50 best.
Yeah, it's not
Which-
your average
yeah,
list
exactly.
of people. Like,
Yeah.
there's 3 Michelin star chefs there. There's important media there.
Yeah.
A good group of people. I remember it was an amazing group of people. I
It
think
was.
Andrew Zimmern was
Andrew
with us.
Zimmer was there.
Will Gadara was with us.
Yeah,
Nicolas
Aaron.
Chatnier was there.
Yeah, no, it was-
Aaron was there from Resi.
Yeah,
you know,
no.
we had this great group of people that really appreciate food.
Yeah,
you know?
Filippo was there too. Yeah. So we go there, we're sitting, we're having like the little appetizers, the bread and butter, which I think it's in London, bread and butter game is way
Strong.
strong and
Thanks.
strong.
Thanks for giving us one doff.
No, dude, it's I love it. You know, I love it. So we're sitting there, we're having the appetizers, everything, but we're all waiting for the big moment of
The reveal.
the whole pig, no? So we're sitting there. They walk through the room because they bring it somewhere else, and that's not a dish that they can cook in their regular kitchen. So they bring it from whatever they cooked it. They walk through the dining room with the pig and like almost says hi to us in the
Yeah,
way
because
there.
again, they did what we wanted them to do with the beef Wellington. They
showed, yeah.
and the pig is. I mean, that's days of work to do
Yeah.
right. No, it's glazed, it's shiny.
No.
You already smell it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh man, this is gonna be
Epic.
the
It's one of those.
thing ever.
Yeah, so they take the pig to the kitchen, which is an small kitchen, open. We're still there drinking wine, sharing stories, laughing, eating some things, and we hear a big bang in the kitchen.
Which I actually paid zero attention to.
Yeah,
I hear this bang. Okay,
Yeah.
someone dropped a plate.
Exactly. Minutes pass. One of the waiters, I think it was the maitre d' or something, comes to our table. Super nice girl. like, I need to tell you something. Like, what? Like, we dropped the pig. I didn't understand. Like, what does we drop the pig means? Like, pick it up. No, pick it up, put it back. We don't care. Pick it up, like, dust it a little bit and put it back in the dish. We don't care.
See, so you find out before, because at this moment, I'm not privy to this conversation.
They tell this to me in the ear, like, we don't want to upset everybody. We want to share this.
I'm still oblivious.
Yeah.
I'm still in pig heaven.
I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't tell them. Pick it up, put it together. We don't care.
I remember you coming behind and like putting your hands on my shoulder and saying, dude, I've got some really fucking bad news.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, what? You know, we need to leave in an hour.
Yeah.
And like, what, you know,
the wine is warm.
Can this be? Yeah, the ice has melted. You know, what is it? They dropped the pig. And I was like, what? This can't possibly be. And I remember it's probably the best table to happen to because a lot of people worked in restaurants at that table.
And we understand that things can go wrong.
And they're actually the most forgiving people, weirdly enough. The people that work in restaurants know how stressful it can be. So I remember even Will saying, don't worry, it's the same thing. Bring it.
Yeah, bring it. We don't care.
Scoop the bit that hasn't hit the ground and bring it. And there's no way they're going to do that.
No, it's one, they have like very high standards. Two, I think it's not that it fell. I think it like really like I can imagine like the crispy skin all over the kitchen floor.
Well, that's the other thing. They've cooked this pig to the point of which like the crisp is the skin, the meat is just going to melt away. And if you've ever cooked pork, that's the great thing about pork. It's why I love to barbecue it. It really can take a lot of cooking, and when you get it just right, it melts. So I imagine this is like a CSI crime scene.
Yeah.
There's fucking pig everywhere.
Exactly. So there, I mean, at the end, they said that it was not possible. So they said, don't worry, we're going to make it up for you. And they brought us like other stuff that was still delicious.
I remember going in the kitchen at the end. There's like 3 chefs, and I'm like, which one was it? and as a true team, they were like, we're not telling you.
Exactly.
I'm like looking at them like, which one of you?
Was it you?
Yeah, like trying to see the guilt in their eyes.
Yeah.
Like,
so that was almost 2 years ago. To this day, I'm still
craving that fucking pig.
That. I mean, that's one thing we need to do in the future sometime. I hope they don't charge us if they're listening to this. It was great. It was still a great meal. That's one of my favorite restaurants.
True hospitality. You know what they did is they saw their situation. How do we fix this? They essentially sent the whole menu, if I remember correctly.
They sent one of each. That's what you mean?
They sent one of each. They essentially fixed that issue right on the spot.
Yeah, and
it's become a bit of a legendary story. You know,
but even they said it's the first time that happened to them.
That's what I'd say as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I just fucking dropped a $250 pig.
Exactly. So I've been there some like 3 or 4 times after this. Maybe not anymore, but like definitely the first 2 times when the story was still fresh, I got like still apologies and like free,
I'm sure,
stuff and everything. I'm sure they still will recognize us if we go there. Like, those are the pig guys, but I'll make a point. I don't know if the same people, exact same people.
That would be beautiful if we could somehow get that same group back to London to do it again and like
that would be
right the wrong.
Because
I swear sometimes I wake up in hot sweats and I'm like I dropped it, but it's actually not. It's psychological. I need to eat that pig.
But that's one of those meals that we almost enjoyed and we didn't. But I'm sure we'll do it. Bueno, talking about epic meals or epic trips. You keep telling me also about this story. I think it was a benefit for a foundation or something that you had to do as many Michelin stars in 24 hours in the UK. I think is that like an unofficial, unwritten word record that you still brag about? How do you, I did it 3 weeks ago, and when we were planning this, like, we don't want to come across like, oh, we've been here and there, but it's like I did 6 Michelin stars 3 weeks ago in 14 hours. I mean, back-to-back dinner at this Frutar and lunch at the Celler de Can Roca in Barcelona and Girona. So that was 6 stars in 14 hours, and I felt I accomplished something. So you did,
Yeah, because it's an obsession, isn't it?
Yeah.
We live by an obsession. This is just our life. And I never wrote about some of this stuff because I was always struggling to like what does it mean to a reader to just hear an experience that only I could have because we are lucky.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate how lucky we are. This was for charity. This was for a group called Hospitality Action. And Hospitality Action, if you run a pub or a restaurant in the UK and you're part of Hospitality Action, and let's say you have a fire and insurance is not paying out, they will step in and pay for you.
Okay, interesting.
So there was a charity angle to this, and the invite was essentially, it's called the Michelin Rally. And the idea was to do as many Michelin star restaurants as you could in 24 hours.
Okay.
As a journalist, that's a story, yeah. I even bought, I remember going to the UK from Italy, I bought all of this extra equipment because I knew that I'd need to keep batteries going. So I brought extra battery packs, microphones to put in the car. And we arrive in the north of England, which is where we meet, and it's been sponsored by Enterprise Cars, who've provided Mercedes for everyone.
Which area? Because it's not easy to find a geographic area unless you are like in Paris or Tokyo where you can access, let alone
One of the first
go...
restaurants we went to was Lenclume, so we're sort of in the Lake District, Cumbria area of the UK. That's where we start. And they've given us a list of, let's say, 10 restaurants.
Okay.
These are already booked. These guys are already expecting you. We have a chef's shirt. And our job is to go in and get it signed. All the chefs are giving us books. These stuff is going to be raffled off to raise money. We've all paid a lot of money to be part of it.
Okay.
You couldn't get sponsorship for it. It wasn't like doing a marathon. You couldn't go, can you give me £1 for every mile I run?
Yeah.
No one's going to sponsor you for eating food.
At Michelin restaurants.
So we'd all paid quite a lot for the ticket. And I was thinking, this is going to be a great story. I come with all this, I've got all this equipment on me and I'm going to do this amazing story. And I get there and the event's been sponsored by certain brands that conflicted with the brands that were sponsoring the website I was working for. Again, I had to call my editor.
Yeah.
And she thought I'd pulled the wool over her eyes. Yeah, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't think I can do this story. There's these brands all over it. Yeah, you can't, just enjoy it. She was upset.
Even better.
And I remember in the car park, they put us in our groups. So we were in a Mercedes. There was a group of 4 people. I can't even drive this car. You have to be 35 to drive the car at the time. So I'm not insured. I'm not a good person to have in your group because I can't share the driving.
Yeah.
So I'm saying to the group, don't worry. I'll be the navigator. I'll phone the restaurants. I'll do the bookings. I'll earn my space in the car. And there's a young guy from Manchester, Alex, who runs this website, sous-vide-tools.com. He sells these amazing sous vide equipment, and he's in the group. And obviously, he's competitive because straight away he's like, that's not enough restaurants. Don't worry, I'll phone some more and I'll add them. And we have another guy in the group who used to be a barrister. He'd been a lawyer in Liverpool, and he'd then gone into forensic photography, and from forensic photography into food photography.
It's still dead animals versus what dead people. Well, is that how it works?
Super interesting guy.
Wow.
Yeah? And he was the same. We're going to win this, even though it's not really pipped as a competition. In our mind, it is. We need to get more than everyone else. And the other guy that's in our group is an older chef. He sort of comes up and he's like, have we decided where we're going to sleep tonight? And these two give each other a look. They know it, and they turn to me and we're like, we need to get rid of him. I say, why? I said, because we're not fucking sleeping tonight. Yeah. Like we're winning this competition. Like, the first thing he asked us about is a hotel. Like, get rid of him. And that's my job. So after that, I said to him, look, I think maybe those guys are speaking about hotels. And I go over to that group and there's a young chef and I say, hey, come with us, man.
Yeah, we're doing this.
Like on the football pitch at school when you're like making sure your team's right. Like, we knew we didn't have the right player for what we wanted to do. So I'm just in it for the story. Like, okay, let's do this. Who are these crazy people? I'd never met them before. And we swap chefs. We get a younger chef and he's up for it. He's in. And I remember we had Google Maps and everyone had put their self into it. So you could actually see where everyone was going. I knew nothing, yeah? I was like France. get to Paris.
Okay.
It'll take us 4 or 5 hours. Let's get to Paris, get on the train, and we can smash more Michelin stars than anyone can think of in one city.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to leave the country. They start to give us the rules. You can book extra restaurants. Please don't be too rude if you know them already. I've got a sous vide salesman in my car.
Yeah.
He knows everybody.
Yeah.
So he's already on the phone, explaining the situation, adding restaurants, and I'm logistically mapping this out, because what happens is, of course, you get there, you're supposed to have one plate, they give you 3 plates. Suddenly the logistics get pushed.
You need to push the other
Yeah, and I'm
bookings.
phoning like, sorry, it's not 8, we'll be there at 9. Sorry, it's not 9, we'll be there at 10. And it got to the point where, like, I remember one place is this 2 Michelin star restaurant, and I'm phoning them at 11. Like, we're not going to make it. We said we would. We're really sorry. Is there any way you can leave something outside? And I'm like, we're a 2 Michelin star restaurant. That's impossible. Put the phone down. The chef rang back like 20 minutes later. How about a cheese box? So I got a picture, and I'll try to send it to you so you can put it on the screen. We pull up to this castle at like 2 a.m. It's a 2 Michelin star castle. We pull up at 2 a.m. and there's 4 white boxes just outside, left outside the gates.
With cheese.
With cheese. Beautiful cheese, exceptional cheese, and we eat it on the bonnet of this Mercedes, taking pictures because we're keeping like the evidence. And my other job is to monitor everyone else, because everyone's tweeting and posting about what they're doing. So I'm like, they're on 18, they're on 10, forget them. They're out of the race. Like, this is our competition. They're on, we're on 19, they're on 18. Shit, it's going to be tight. And this is where having a lawyer comes in really well. He's doing most of the driving. He said to me, find out where they're staying, because we had each other on maps. So I sort of zoom in on the map, and it's got to be this hotel. Like, they haven't moved for the last hour. It must be this.
And there's not many hotels in the area, probably.
Yeah. He said, get me their number. I'm like, what's he going to do? So I get the number for this hotel. It's late in the morning. He rings this hotel. He's like... it's imperative. Do you have a Mr. Gordon Cartwright staying there at your hotel? He said, yeah. He said, it's imperative he doesn't leave in the morning until he's spoken to me. It's an emergency. Should we get him up, sir? No, it's fine, but he mustn't leave that hotel until he's spoken to me. Still, no idea what that meant. Didn't think much of it, but like 7 o'clock in the morning, the phone starts going.
At this point, you haven't slept, no?
No, we went right through her.
Okay.
Because essentially, we did everything we could in the north, and then when it gets to like 2 on that cheese box, we decide to drive to the south. So in the morning, we start in London.
Okay.
We start at like the Shard.
Uh-huh.
The chef, I can't remember the name, Gary.
Yeah, the one in the like 35th floor or something. Yeah.
We start at the Shard, and then we drive to Bray. For like the Fat Duck. And because Bray, if anyone knows, is like a little, within a small square mile, you have like 5, 6 Michelin stars.
Yes.
And then from Bray, we end up going all the way out to the Hand and Flowers.
Oh, nice.
And doing Tom Kerridge's pub there as well. So, we're really mapping it out and planning it. About 7 in the morning, this lawyer's phone starts going, and I'm about to answer it because he's still driving. He's like, leave it. That'll be the hotel. And that's when I realised what he'd done. And he just let that phone ring until about 9:30, then picked it up and was like, oh, yeah, God, don't worry about it. Something last night came up, but don't worry about it. It's fine now.
Basically, so you delayed them a couple
slowed
of hours.
him down by 2.5 hours, yeah. And we probably didn't need to be this competitive, but that's what happens when you get a group of crazy foodies together.
So you ended up winning the competition, no?
Yeah, and it was a self-created competition.
Yeah.
I think we ended in Birmingham in a car park, all kind of sleeping in the car for a couple of hours, like bloated. I mean, this was not a good thing to do to yourself.
No, of course not.
This is not as good as it sounds.
You did it for now telling the story, but
there's only so much foie gras you can eat in 24 hours. There's only so much Michelin. It's rich, it's heavy. Every single restaurant wanted to give you more than one course. Every single one. I mean, I still remember we get to the last place. It's probably a bit past the Hand and Flowers. Can't even remember the name. That's quite sad, but that's what I mean. It like all rolls into one. And he said, we've done you the chef's table. And he took us into the kitchen, and I'm like, oh God, they're gonna feed us loads. And we don't look happy. I've got a snap somewhere of us where we're supposed to look all happy, but we look a bit drained and a bit pissed. And that's because we think we've lost by 1. Because that's the other thing. Halfway through, people stop sharing. They weren't sharing as much. So you couldn't be certain where you were in this race, yeah? We couldn't be quite sure. And he said, what's up with you guys? Like, they were giving us a room for the night. It was the last meal. I thought you'd be much happier than you are. The chef is literally asking us, what's wrong? We say, we think we've lost by 1. And the chef was like, that can't happen. I have a mate. He's about an hour down the road. He's got 1 star. Shall I call him? And we're like, yeah, please. And we left there at like 1 a.m. They stayed open. We blasted down to there to get 1 more star. I think in the end it was 26.
Wow, in 24 hours.
26 Michelin restaurants in 24 hours. And the one thing that does...
26 stars or 26 Michelin?
26 Michelin restaurants. If you count the stars, it's probably...
Wow. Even
in the 30s, because some of them were free, some of them were 2. Mate, it was an unbelievable memory and an unbelievable thing to take part in. A bit gluttonous, like I must admit. It was like at least one of the 7 deadly sins was involved there, probably more. And the thing that upset me was they never spoke to Guinness. They never got them in, because I'm pretty certain we'd have a world record there. So now I just tell people it's an unofficial world record.
We'll probably have to ask like Jonathan or somebody if he's heard of somebody doing it.
It's funny because there was a guy. There's a story I've been obsessed with for a long time, and I'm going to tell it at some point correctly, but it needs like a proper investigation. But there's a story about a racing car driver, Pascal Henry, from Switzerland, who decided he was going to eat at all the free Michelin star restaurants in the world, in Europe.
Okay.
And he set off from Switzerland on this mission to do it. And he had this little book, apparently. He would take notes, and every time he went to one restaurant, he would tell them the mission he was on, and they would phone other 3-star restaurants.
Okay.
Because it's very different, 3-star versus 1-star, even just getting the booking. And he was driving, apparently, in a Ferrari. And this is a story that obsesses me. It's a story that at one point I'm going to truly get into, and I'm going to trace his journey and tell this story.
Replicate it, maybe.
Replicate it, or even find him, because what actually happened is he got to Spain. He did like the likes of Barcelona, and he ended up going up the coast. You know where he's heading? He's going into Roses, to El Bulli, which is one of the most important restaurants of the past 50 years.
Well, the most, probably, yeah.
And he gets to El Bulli and he dines at El Bulli and he's having this meal solo, and apparently at the end of the meal he meets a German couple at the side and they start to converse. You know, that's what restaurants do. It's what we said at the beginning. And eventually they ask him to join the table and they start having a drink together. And he says, how do we keep in touch? And Pascal says to this couple, I'll go and get you a card from the car. And he disappears.
Nobody heard.
No one knows where he's gone. The Ferrari's still in the car park. The little black book that he'd kept on his journey is still at the table.
Maybe he fell down to
That's what people think. The police are coming in, investigating it. Interpol start a search for him. He appears 3 weeks later back in Switzerland. They catch him drawing money because Interpol are looking for him. And he's never, ever told anyone what happened.
Wow.
He's never said where he went, why he left, how he got back. Because I know Ferran Adria, he saves everything, yeah? There's something about Ferran Adria, like he knew he was going to be famous before he was famous.
Yeah, he has all these little memorabilia
things. He's got
things.
his first pay slip from the military. And when he did a museum, he did a exhibition about El Bulli and the history of El Bulli. The thing that shocked me was like, who the fuck saves that?
Yeah.
Like his first pen from when he was a kid at school. I'm like, how? It's like some divine spirit told him save all of that stuff. And I was doing an interview with Ferran, and at the end of the interview, because he's one of these people that you want to do everything right with. Absolutely. Ferran. He's a very strong character, but at the end, I'm going to have to be cheeky because I'm obsessed with this story of Pascal and this racing car driver. So I say to Ferran, did he ever pay the bill? And where's the black book? Because I know he saves everything.
Oh.
So there's a part of me thinks that he's got this black book, that he knows more about what happened. And he shunned my question. No. We don't speak about that. We're speaking about my exhibition. We're speaking about me, not this guy. And my dream is to probably do a bit of a series where I retrace those steps, but also I go and I knock on his door. And
is this guy still alive?
Still around,
Okay.
still alive. There's been a few stories about it, a few things written about it, but he's never fully
Interesting.
said what happened, how he got back.
Why
Was it just too much rich food that sort of sent him in a spin? It obsesses me, that story. and I think it would be a great series to really explore that journey that they went on.
Well, let me know. Maybe that's
Our next road trip.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's do it. We can going back to amazing meals and Michelin stars and everything. I know Vespertine just opened back to the public. Vespertine is this crazy, not crazy, that's unfair. It's very particular restaurant by
Original.
Jordan Kahn in LA, in Culver City. Beautiful building, 4 stories. I know there's a part of no, we're not gonna go there. Don't worry. Shall we? No, we're not gonna go there. Is this?
This is fine. You make me.
Oh, this is coffee.
You make me reveal my stories, but you don't reveal yours.
No, there's one story of you that we're not revealing. But let's talk about food. And I remember that meal was. What I remember about that meal. And we mentioned this before, and again, not in an arrogant or cocky way, but we have been lucky enough to have had experienced amazing meals in the last years. And when we first sat at Vespertine, which is very experimental, very avant-garde.
Even the building it's in, no?
Yeah, the building, yeah.
It's like this fractal architecture. It looks like a rocket ship.
Absolutely.
It looks like at some point it's going to take off on thrusters
and
go to Mars.
Yeah, we started the meal like in the garden. Then you go to the first floor. Then you go to the second floor. You walk through the kitchen. I mean, one of those experiences were
truly special.
Yeah, and at some point, I think actually we go to the rooftop, and that's where we have the appetizers, and we sit there. I mean, was you, another friend, your dad was
which
with
is
us.
what made it special for me.
Yeah.
I think is that we brought my dad.
Yeah.
You know, old school. He was a cook in the Navy, my dad.
Uh-huh.
If you called him a chef, he'd hit you and say I was a cook because he knows the definition. You know, my dad was doing omelets for 150 sailors in the morning.
Wow.
Like, he has great stories, but I love introducing people that are not in our world to that world. And I've done it a couple of times with my dad. I took him to 41 Degrees in Barcelona.
Oh,
and he still speaks about the best bacon sandwich of his life. And I'm like, dude, that was the air-fried baguette with 24-month ham on Serrano ham. Like, that was not a bacon sandwich.
Yeah, and there's 41 courses in that in that
41
menu.
mini bites.
Yes,
yeah. And
crazy.
My dad still speaks about that. I did it recently at Disfrutar for a friend of mine who was getting married. I took the guys I grew up with when you know we all grew up together eating kebabs, and I said, "Look, we're lucky enough that for your stag do, we're going to go there." I love doing that, like taking people that have never had that, because it just reminds me of my first foray into this world, and there's something special. So yeah, Liverpool were playing, if I remember correctly.
I remember, yeah.
Me and my dad have a deal where we watch every final together. It was a Champions League final.
Yeah, and we made sure the Airbnb where we were staying that we could watch. That was like one
Had a screen,
like AC. Like car park and TV with access to the Champions League final.
And so we bring, and my dad still references this. He's got these little odd memories, like as well. He's got this memory of like I took him to a place in Italy called Tripa.
Yeah,
which
it's
famous for doing lots of offal. I mean, the name Tripa is tripe, and they do this wonderful fried tripe. The one thing my dad doesn't like to eat is offal.
And that place is amazing.
Especially because he's never had it at the level we've had it at. So for him, offal is just like a terrible plate of like liver and onions done very badly, overcooked. So we get in there and I said to the chef, like, no cow vagina, because he also, that's as far as he pushes it. The guy will serve every part of the animal, and I really respect that. I said, look, I've got my dad. I just love a classic ragu. Yeah. And at the same time, there's a famous journalist at the bar he keeps calling me over. Like, I'm sat having dinner with my dad, and he keeps calling me over and like, try this. Because he knows that I'm on like the simple menu.
Yeah.
And at one point he calls me over, he's like, open wide. And I open my mouth and he throws in this like fried, really salty bite. I was like, what's that? And he's like, a fried tuna spur.
Yeah.
And I come back down and I sit down. And my dad, who's like from Liverpool, grew up really like working class, he's like, so this is what you do now, eh? You fucking come to bars and like people toss fucking fried tuna sperm in your mouth. I've never seen, he's never seen him more disappointed in my life choices than that evening.
And they pay you for that. Yeah.
So we bring him to LA. And
we bring him to LA. It was fantastic to spend those days with him as well. So we sat there at Vespertine waiting for the first course. And I remember we look at the food and we felt like, like in those movies where you have like a farmer or somebody from the suburbs going to a castle and in front of 5 different types of forks and glasses and you don't know where to start. That's how we felt that day.
Yeah.
And we were like, looked at each other, started laughing like, what the hell is this?
Because what very little surprises us anymore. Yeah. We really are in that lucky position where we've seen every way of playing, every way of presenting. Originality is really hard to do.
It's hard to. Originality that ends up being actually like delicious, edible. Because
very hard to do.
Yeah. So we're like pointing at different things. I remember it was like a rack with things hanging and we didn't know what was edible and what was like the core. And
we're all lost. Yeah, we were completely lost. It was like being on a fucking alien planet.
Yeah.
And eating alien food. Yeah, yeah.
With alien stuff also. Sorry. No, it was like a show, like a scene, like even everything had like a choreography, the service, the
way they walk, the way they talk, the silence in the building.
Yeah, it was definitely, and what I'm glad it was at the end a delicious meal. We had some help from the guys of Mad Men that we did some shopping before, which I heard they are out of business.
Oh, really?
Yeah, business model didn't work, I guess. But yeah, I remember that meal like one of the most, if not one of the most delicious, even though it was delicious, one of the most challenging in terms of facing a new type of fine dining, no?
Yeah, and I interviewed Jordan, like I did a big piece about him. Actually, before that meal, because I was I'm obsessed with architecture. I mentioned at the beginning, my wife's an architect, and she's really taught me to appreciate architecture. That building, we must put a picture up of that building because it's special. Like the way it looks.
And it was built with the restaurant. It's not like they rented it and they decided to put a restaurant there.
The truth is, he was driving past one day and he saw the building and was like, that's it. That's where I want to have a restaurant. And
I wasn't built for the restaurant.
No. And he called the architect, who's an architect who's built a lot of buildings in that area, and he convinced him. And I still remember doing the interview and saying to him, what floor are you on then?
All of them.
Yeah. And he said, the whole fucking building.
The whole building.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Because I expected him, we've got the top floor and the next one down. No.
It's the whole building. It's the restaurant.
Yeah.
No, it was quite experience. I remember I had it for a while. They give you a perfume of the restaurant, and
I forgot about that. That was beautiful because smell can really hit you. Yeah. Smell can take you back. In fact, there's a lot of research going on right now in using smell to help with people who have got dementia, like things like Alzheimer's. Music, they use a lot of music as well from their past. But there's something, it's rare that it happens, but there's something that can happen in the brain when a smell hits you. It can transport you back. It's a very powerful tool. It's like brain tattooing, Andoni calls it. And I told him about it, was like a brain tattoo.
Nice. And I remember we left I remember the smell of the restaurant. It was beautiful.
So what they do with that smell is they put it everywhere. They put it in the soap, they put it on the napkins, they put it on plates, they
Yeah.
put it on your seats.
Yes.
And the idea is, because everyone gives you a menu when you leave the restaurant, yeah? And they're lovely. I collect
Yeah.
them. I've been
I
to your
have-
house, you have them framed, some
Yeah.
of them. That's how obsessive
Exactly.
we are. You frame menus, you weirdo.
Well,
And this smell, the idea was that, hey, in 3 months' time, you put that smell in the air, and we've used that smell so much that we think we can transport you back
Yes.
here. And that's
And
just
they
a
did.
little bit of their originality. It's not a coincidence that the only people they followed on Instagram on their channel was NASA.
yeah.
I don't know if that's
And-
still the case, but they follow one
NASA.
one channel, and it's NASA. Yeah.
And it's a nice story before, because when he had another restaurant, I don't remember now, Red something in LA. Now he has also Destroyer, but when he was planning to do this restaurant, he disappeared from media. He
Purposely.
and he wanted to clean his mind.
And he surrounded himself with designers,
Yes.
architects, artists, poets.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first restaurant I went to that's got its own soundscape,
Yeah,
designed by his favourite band.
exactly.
And he literally went to see them gig. It's funny because when I wrote the piece, I put that soundscape on to sort of
nice.
get me in the mood while I was writing this piece. So he literally went and got lucky. Red Medicine.
Red
the
Medicine.
restaurant.
Red Medicine.
He said to them, "I'm the chef from Red Medicine," and the band said, "That's our favourite restaurant." And he said, "Good, because I've got something to ask you. Will you compose an entire soundscape for the restaurant?" And so every night, this sort of 4-hour soundscape plays out for everyone who dines
Beautiful.
there.
No, beautiful. It was an experience. I'm looking forward to go back to that one.
It's interesting that there's not more restaurants like that, because it is so hard to do original like that.
And also, we can do a whole conversation about it. I mean, is that restaurant profitable, or it's a whole building in one of the most expensive real estate cities like LA? A lot of staff in an industry that we already know it's hard to make money. So, it doesn't surprise me that we don't see those many restaurants lately, but it's quite an experience. And LA, I think in general, I haven't been there in a while, and I went 3 months ago after I think 2 or 3 years, definitely before COVID, so 3 years. And I think it was missing a fine dining scene, and I'm seeing it now. And more than fine dining, tablecloths and everything, is very thoughtful food, but of course, in a more casual context. One of the meals that I enjoy the most is Yes with double S, Japanese chef with Korean ovens. It was delicious. I want to definitely go back. We should probably replicate that trip as well.
And now I'm thinking I'd love to sit my dad down and just interview him just really quickly for 10 minutes. Just to be how was this for you?
Exactly.
Because we were out of our comfort zone, and that's been our life for years.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I have this beautiful picture of him drinking this drink. If you remember, they served us a drink and it's got this flower, and even the flower looks
yes.
like it came from Mars.
Yes.
It's this huge. And I have this picture of my dad who cannot understand how to drink his drink, because every time he does it, his flower goes up his nose. And he just doesn't know what to do. Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't just take the flour and down his drink, knowing my dad.
Interesting. No, we definitely have some meals lined up. I think we're meeting soon in Vegas for 50 Best.
Yeah, World's 50 Best.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Back to Vegas.
I'm excited for that one. We just finished Lengua conference that now we did for the third time in Miami.
Well.
It's gone very well. Again, talking about connections, we created very strong connections with local community chefs and restaurant owners, operators who came from other cities to share their stories. So we'll be doing more of that, definitely. But again, Ryan, thanks a lot for your time. I know we are super tired because it's been a hard week. You're flying back tomorrow to Paris.
Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure we're gonna do this again. We'll accumulate stories. So once a while.
Let's see if people hate us or not. Because
Exactly.
I'm still a bit like, I like to share these stories, but this is the first time I've ever shared them publicly.
Yeah.
Because I realize that this can come across as a little bit like, look at these very privileged people and having these
sharing their
experiences.
Michelin star stories.
Yeah, and actually, look, some of the best memories is anticucho.
Yeah.
In the streets of Peru, or tacos that we had together
No,
in
and
Mexico.
I think we've talked.
It doesn't have to be the top.
Yeah.
I get just as excited about that cachito as I
Exactly.
do about that vespertine.
No, those are the stories that we happen to share today. But we have, I'm a street food passionate. Like everywhere I go, I care maybe more because you do want maybe 2 high-end meals. But then,
last night we went for pizza.
Exactly.
And it was one of the best meals I've had
Exactly.
here in
And
Miami.
we do markets, we do street food. So I think it's nice to have the full spectrum and to understand cultures and cities and people by the full portfolio of food offerings, no?
Yeah, I feel like maybe to justify some of these crazy stories, you're going to have to give away an amazing meal to some of
Yeah.
your listeners. How about that? Putting you on the spot.
Let's do it.
Yeah. The people that send us their best story of dining win a meal, and they can order one of each.
Sounds good. So thanks a lot for, as I mentioned at the beginning, if you're seeing this, it's because somebody as crazy as us thought people
This
would...
was appropriate for the public.
Exactly. But we have some stories that we'll probably share in the future. But if you want to know about whereabouts of Ryan, your Instagram is RJ King Says,
Yeah,
right?
RJ King Says.
RJ
yes.
King Says. Mine is Nidal Barake. I'm sure it's written somewhere. And my projects are Glutonomy is my marketing agency. And Lengua Conference is the conference we were talking about. It's a food marketing conference. So yeah, thanks for listening to us. I think listening to us and watching us a little bit over a couple of hours. Right, it's always a pleasure. The good and bad news for us is we're gonna stop recording, but we have an afternoon of plans and dinner at Diego Oca's restaurant. So this conversation is
So
gonna...
what are you doing now? Eating.
Exactly. So thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
No, my pleasure. Bye.
Thank you.